Hi, I'm Angela Wilder, and this is Conversations. This week, I have the privilege of talking with Ms. Mabel Robinson, an artist extraordinaire. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yes.
And there is so much to learn about you. I just want to jump right in. So you live in Winston-Salem now?
Yes, I do.
But are you a native of Winston-Salem?
No, I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and I was raised in New York City. Like half of my life, I came to Winston-Salem. I was invited to teach at the School of the Arts.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and I've been here ever since, 33 years.
Okay,
Yes.
so your world is the arts, yes?
Yes, definitely.
How and when did you know that was the direction that you wanted to go?
Well, my grandmother told me that from the time I could pull up in the crib, that I was a dancer. She would put the radio on long as I was fed and dry. She would put the radio on. She could do all her housework and everything else, and I would just be entertained all of the time. So I didn't know, but I was given this art, and it's always served well for me. So.
And when or did you train formally?
I started to train. I went to a school in New York City called Mary Bruce. Mary Bruce was a woman that had little children from the age of 4 to 7, and we were the Starbuds. And each year we had a concert, you know how they do the concerts. and so that was my first basic training. As far as coming together with a group of people and learning, choreography, etc., or technique, and it was tap. It was basically tap. Then I went to Henry Lee Tang, and I think you know him. It was called Ruth Williams and Henry Lee Tang Studios, and Henry Lee Tang was the choreographer for what was the name of this show? A couple of Broadway shows that were, and I can't remember the name now, but I can always find them for you if you need. Tap. He did the tap choreography for a lot of Broadway shows. Yeah.
So tap was your introduction. Did you study other forms?
Tap was my introduction. I went to, when I went to middle school, Sarah Lee Howell, my gym teacher she took me over to a community center, which was basically a babysitter until my mom came home, from school. But I went there, and Verita Pearson, who was my first knowledgeable mentor, taught there, and she taught us everything. I mean, it was just rounded, rolling the R's, and the songs that we sang. And then she had Brunhilde Ruiz, who was a ballet dancer from the American Ballet. She would come because she started at that community center, PS 101. And different people came and taught us basic steps, positions, et cetera, that I had never seen before. And she also introduced me to the School of the Arts. Now, she knew I was a dancer, and she gave me this dance. When I was younger, there were, I don't know the name of the company, but they had the choreography on sheets of paper. So, and mine was Slave Girl. I didn't want to do Slave Girl. I wanted to do the ballet. I wanted to dance. She said, "You will do Slave Girl. This is the basis of, this is your heritage, you know what I mean? This is your ancestors." And she did the whole thing. And that was also a thing that she was very known for. I always knew why I was doing them and why it was necessary for me to do them. And won many awards with that Slave Girl dance, and got into the School of the Arts in New York City.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And that's where my real training began.
Yes, and at that point, then, were you able to branch out into other roles?
Oh yeah, well, you had high school. I went from 8th grade to senior in high school, then I went to Juilliard School of Music for another 4 years, full scholarship student. And during the summer, Jones Beach, you've heard of Jones Beach, Guy Lombardo, and Showboat, and all of those things. When I was in the summer, we would go and would do that show on Long Island, and so that was like my first performing, you know. Then I started to work with Alvin Ailey, I'm sure you have heard of, when Alvin Ailey and Carmen de Lavalla and Christine Lawson and, oh God, what is his name, Ralph. Anyway, there was one guy, there were 4 of them that came from the West Coast. And I started working with them, and that time I was in high school. And so I was learning the technique that Alvin basically taught, and that was, you know, my memory is not the greatest anymore, but it was basically the style that Alvin was known for. It's a shame. Okay, but anyway, I mean, you know how he moves, and you know, and with the ballet, but I said the isolations, and it was just a whole other style that was wonderful for me. So I worked with Alvin, and then I worked with Miss Graham, Martha Graham.
Yes.
That was when I was in Juilliard, she was the main teacher there. So, but I always continued to work with Alvin, you know. Then I worked with Donnie McHale and Tally Beatty, so and Louis Johnson, Nikki was, oh God, he was basically a dancer with Miss Dunham. And I was able to work with Miss Dunham when she came back from Europe, because most of her work was done and her acceptance was in Europe. And then I was able to do work with her company, and we were at the Apollo.
Okay,
Yes.
so did you ever travel outside of the United States,
Oh, yes.
working as a
Yes,
dancer?
yes, all over the world. Miss, we had the first world tour that I did was with the Graham Company, and I was in the junior company at that particular time. And what it was, you go and we represented America, and we went to different parts of the world, from Germany to Israel to, I mean, just Japan. Didn't go to China, you know. Didn't go to Russia until later years when I came down here, went to School of the Arts and went to Russia to teach them basically modern dance, you know, so, or a technique that would be a combination of ballet and traditional, because in most countries you would have ballet and then you would have traditional, but they didn't have a technique that would bring them together, so that would strengthen the bodies of the young people. And since it was so prevalent in the schools there, that's why I kind of went there to do that. And also in Zimbabwe, I went and did that same kind of thing. However, I'm just off a base right now. But yeah, I traveled many years around the world.
And then when you came to the School of the Arts, you came as
my performance time was over.
Okay, so you made the
Yes.
transition from
Yes,
performer
yes.
to teacher.
The performer to choreographer.
Okay.
I started doing choreography, and I've always taught, and as a choreographer you basically teach, but you always teach, you know, if you're going to teach someone else the choreography, or you have to go back and pay your respects and do homage from where you came, and at the PS 101, so I went and taught the way I was taught there. I went and taught dance there as well while I was at the School of the Arts, you know. And so you always taught, I always taught. And my teachers at Juilliard, the way they taught you learn the history as well as the techniques and how the arts were related, you know. So we knew an art form, not just dance or singing or music. It was total, you know.
Yes.
So that's where I was raised, and that's what I always believed in was total theater. Basically, is what it was, you know, or is.
I'm sure that both are fulfilling, but what's the difference for you, or is there a difference, I'm making an assumption, between the one who's performing and then the one who is the choreographer?
Well, when you are choreographing, you choreograph, and you try to make the performer. Now you're talking about me as a choreographer,
Yes,
teaching someone else.
yes.
You try to give them the freedom of expressing what it is that you are choreographing, because I wouldn't want anybody to just copy, you know, what I am. They have to, as artists, they must be able to put their creativity into it.
Yes.
And if you respect, and I think that if you respect an artist, you would give them that opportunity that, no, just do it like this because that's where I want it. No, it's just not the way I feel you should do it. I always think that there has to be a respect, and there's another layer that the artist, the performing artist, will put on the choreographer's, you know, work.
Right,
So,
right. What's been the most fulfilling professional accomplishment for you?
God. You know, I've had so many fulfilling moments, and that I don't know, I think that to be given the gift and to be led in a way, okay, if this is the root, I'm the root. I've been always fortunate enough to have branches of everything that I've done and how I began, and I don't know how I got to those places, because I never thought about choreography or directing or being a playwright. I always just thought I would dance for the rest of my life, and that wasn't the way it was. So Rita Pearson, Bernard Carroll said to me, well, I love the way you dance, darling. Why don't you try to come in and choreograph this piece for me? I love the way you dance. I said, oh, okay. Even though I studied choreography, I just didn't think of being a choreographer professionally. And
you are, yes.
Yes.
And then as a playwright, where does that come from for you?
The playwright, you know, I came, when you become a director, when I became a director, there were certain things, and when I went to Holland and did several series of pieces that was happening. There was a young man by the name of Billy Wilson, and he was a ballet dancer, but he went, you know, a lot of the ballet dancers were in European companies, you know. So he was in Holland, and he married, and has a family in Holland. So he was there, and he always did, because there is a big African or black community in Amsterdam and Holland, you know, and the different parts of Holland, you know. So, but anyway, long story short, this company, Stardust Production, when Billy Wilson passed, they were asking, you know who Otis Salid is?
No.
Otis Salid, he's a choreographer that does a lot of movies. He did Sister Act and things like that.
Yes.
He's like a Michael Jackson, not Michael Jackson. Michael taught Michael Jackson. But anyway, but Otis did other things that were basically shows that you had big production value, but not necessarily dance. Michael Peters, and both Michael Peters and Otis Lee were my students. So they said, well, the only person that I know that, do big production things now, I'm getting to Holland, how I got to Holland. And they had asked Otis Lee to do it. And he said, well, I don't do big production anymore. And the only person that I really know that I would recommend is Mabel Robinson. So I said, okay. So they came to New York and we met, and I was already in Winston by then. Came to New York and met and asked if I would come and do this piece. They had a piece called Dancing in the Streets that was kind of based on the Supremes, or a has-been, company of three ladies and what their backgrounds were.
Right.
It was kind of based on that storyline, And the producers that did these shows, they were really producers of circuses, like Cirque du Soleil.
Yes.
And that was what they had, this money that they always had a respect for black theater. So they decided to have a black theater company or do black shows. But when he wrote the show, of course, he did not have a knowledge of how black people talked, or, and so when I came to direct and choreograph that piece, I said, well, Hank, we don't talk that way. That's not our phrasing. That's not the way we... So that's how I started to do rewrites for him. And then the next year they asked, or 2 years later, they asked if I would do a piece that dealt with gospel music. And I said, well, the best way to deal with gospel music is to start with our history and see how the spiritual and became developed into gospel music. So I did that show with them, and then I did another show with them that I wrote called Mahalia. And when I did Glory of Gospel, when I came back, by that time I was involved with Black Rep, and Larry was alive at the time. And I said, well, I did this particular show in Holland, but they are only interested in the music, basically, but you have to give some of the history in order to make, so they would understand where it came from. But I said, but of course, when we do the script here, it should be Americanized. Right. So that's basically what I did, so.
And then bringing it back to now, I mean, are you still acting, directing, writing?
I still direct, I still choreograph, I still write. I perform very little, if there's something special that I want to do, I will do it, and I've been called as a senior to do a lot of things that are like what we call, well, they're really commercials, but they are small film clips that you use in the hospitals. That are learning. They use them as learning equipment for the doctors or the interns, to learn. If I come into the doctor's office and describe what is ailing me, then they have to decide they have to diagnose it, So, I mean, I've done things like that as well while I was teaching and directing and choreographing, because I like to stay on it. And I think if you stay alive in what it is you're trying to teach or whatever it is that you're trying to portray, then it was easier for me to communicate with the artist, the performing artist. So took you around the world, didn't I?
No, but it was a great trip. Excuse me.
And that's what happens, unfortunately, but anyway.
No, it's wonderful, and I think it's great, particularly for young people and artists that might be thinking perhaps that art is not a way that they can live a full life. Your life shows us that.
Totally full. I've never worked any other way. One time I worked in a bra factory because my sister was working in the bra factory. And I think I worked 3 days, and that was the only job that I ever had that was outside of theater.
Yes.
Yeah, as the arts, out of the arts.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so I started as a dancer, then I became a performer, and then when you teach or choreograph,
Yes.
it's a whole other element. That's why I was talking about those branches, that I was given the opportunity that I never thought, even though I was prepared to do it, I never thought that I would do it.
Yes.
But someone else thought that I could do it. So.
And you did.
And I did.
And we're blessed that you did.
I am blessed that I was put in the path of those people, you know.
Well, thank you.
Well,
Thank
you're
you so
welcome.
much. Thank you
you
for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you. That's volume 1.
Volume 1, yes. Well, you'll have to come back with volume 2 sometime.
I hope so.
Yes,
I hope so.
yes. And thank you for joining us for another conversation. I'm Angela Wilder. I'll be back next week with another conversation with an interesting and extraordinary person from right here in Winston-Salem.